it's hard to argue that education is important for people, right? For first generation students, education can change the course of their lives, their families' lives, their families' lives. So the more you can tell the story to people that have the wherewithal to help, the more they're willing to do that.
I'm Mason Reed, and this is Invested in the Game, an original podcast from Charles Schwab. Each episode, we tell the story of remarkable people who have committed their time, resources, and emotional energy into making golf the wonderful and sometimes maddening game that it is. On today's episode, I'm talking with John Kaczkowski, President and CEO of the Western Golf Association. We had a ton of interest in the Evans Scholars Program after we discussed it with Nick Schreiber from Old Barnwell last season on the podcast. So we wanted to bring in the organization that actually runs the Evans Scholars Program. The WGA has been around for almost 130 years, and John's been at the helm for the last 20 plus of those. They oversee amateur and pro events, and all their efforts go towards raising money to build youth caddy programs, including the Evans Scholars Foundation. But this isn't any regular scholarship. Deserving youth caddies meet extremely high standards and receive full tuition and housing for 4 years. Think about the power of that, particularly with the cost of higher education these days. They have scholarship houses at more than 25 universities, from Notre Dame and the University of Chicago to Howard University and the University of South Carolina. We talked to John about the program, the benefits of using youth caddies, and their ever-expanding footprint of programs and scholarship houses. One final thought before we hear from John. We talk a lot about golf being an incredible game and platform. Did you know that each year the golf industry gives over $4.5 billion to charity in the U.S., more than all other professional sports leagues in this country combined? We're excited to share one small part of that giving story today. Hope you enjoyed the discussion with John as much as I did. John, welcome to Invested in the Game. Thanks for being here.
Oh, Mason, thanks for having me.
We're going to talk about a lot of things underneath the Western Golf Association umbrella, Evans Scholars and youth caddy programs. But first, before we do that, I just want to give a little lay of the land for you personally. And have you been a golf guy your entire life? Like, what's your relationship with golf been? And then we'll switch gears at some point and talk about the organization.
Yeah, I would say, Mason, that I'm an aspiring golf guy for my entire life. Maybe I was always thought I was better than I actually was, but I grew up playing the game in Wisconsin, so the Milwaukee suburbs, and always loved it. And, kind of the same story that a lot of people had is my dad taught me how to play, and he was a middling to high handicapper that didn't teach very good fundamentals. So I had to figure those out, and it's been a great journey. I've been involved in the game, from a playing standpoint, for 40 plus years at least. And like I said, I'm a decent player, but really it's the love for the game that's kept me around.
If I know your story correctly, your personal story, you did not grow up in the golf industry and make your way to the Western Golf Association, right? You could have got there laterally from other career endeavors. Is that right?
Yeah, I was a struggling white-collar professional in that I went to the University of Wisconsin, graduated at a time with a business degree in real estate and urban land economics. And when I graduated, it wasn't a great time to find a job. It was late 80s, 1990. I ended up working in Chicago for Coopers & Lybrand at the time, doing some consulting work. And I realized that, number one, this was serious stuff. And two, I really didn't love wearing a tie every day and riding the train to work. And my brother-in-law at the time was the volunteer chairman of the LA Open. So at Riviera, LA Open, it was run by the LA Junior Chamber of Commerce. And I went out to the tournament and I kind of saw, wow, this is something you can do. Keep in mind, he was the head volunteer. And so I got a really behind the scenes tour of the tournament and met the tournament director at the time and thought to myself, wow, that's a really cool job. And I think at the time I probably was young enough and dumb enough to give everything up in terms of the career I had and pursue a career in the golf business. And I ended up going to grad school down in Miami at a small school called St. Thomas University with the idea that I was going to get credentials in the game of golf, and ended up doing that. So, I ended up going to Miami and just getting as much exposure as I could, including I'll use air quotes, being the assistant golf coach for the University of Miami golf team. I talked my way into that job, but I was also working for the athletic department, which was a very exciting time because they ended up winning the national championship in football that year. And I joke that I did such a great job at the University of Miami. They canceled the golf program immediately after my term was up. And they still incredibly do not have a golf program at the University of Miami.
Unbelievable, with all the talent in Florida and all the golf courses in the world.
Unbelievable. And so I ended up working for the American Junior Golf Association. I ended up kind of full circle. A guy named Greg McLaughlin, who was the tournament director at the LA Open, was the tournament director at the Western Golf Association. And he hired me. We had kept in touch over the years. He hired me in 1998 at the Western Golf Association, and I've been here ever since.
Well, that's fantastic. I did not know about the pit stop at the University of Miami for the air quotes job. That's a great little twist in your story. So you've been there 26, 27 years or so. Maybe for people who are less familiar with the Western Golf Association, I'm a little bit of a sicko in the golf world and know a lot about it. But for people who are listening who aren't as familiar with the Western Golf Association, what would you say at a high level is the mission? Because you cover a lot of ground. You're probably, you're associated obviously with the Western Open. People know that to some degree. And then you're associated with Evans Scholars. But what is the umbrella mission of the organization?
So very briefly, the umbrella mission, as we like to say, we have two ships, championships and scholarships. So we run at the Western Golf Association. It's been around since 1899. We run championship golf, whether it's high-level men's professional golf, high-level men's amateur and junior golf, high-level women's amateur and junior golf. We've done it for a long time, but our focus is to run great championships, all with the purpose of providing funding for our other thing, the scholarship, the Evans Scholarship, which was started in 1930. And it's a program where we send young men and women who caddied to college on a full scholarship, including tuition and housing.
I have several questions about that because it's a fantastic program. Whether somebody is hardcore into golf or is not, I think they will be interested and moved by what you do with those scholarships. But so Chick Evans didn't become a professional golfer, but he did end up funding an account. Is this the genesis of the Evans Scholars program? Was back almost 100 years ago?
Yeah, Mason. So Chick Evans was born and raised. Well, he wasn't born, but he was raised in Chicago on the north side of town. And was a great player. I mean, one of the world's best, if not the best player, right around 10 to 20. And he was actually the first player to ever win the U.S. Open and the U.S. Amateur in the same year. So he did it in 1916. And he didn't want to turn professional. So he got a lot of offers, as you can imagine, at that time to be an endorser of products. And he actually got offered an opportunity to record a series of albums about golf instruction. Keep in mind, there's no video, there's no film. It's records, right?
30 or 40 years before Ben Hogan was making videos and books about it. Okay.
Exactly. And so Chick, instead of taking the money and losing his amateur status, he wanted to form a foundation where caddies could go to college and afford college. And it's interesting because Chick was a caddy as a kid, and his mom thought, rightfully so, education was very important. And so he went to Northwestern and had to drop out because he didn't have enough money to pay for college. And so he didn't want that to happen to future caddies. Of course, he lived in Chicago. The Western Golf Association has been based in Chicago since its inception, and Chick knew a lot of the principals at the Western Golf Association. So he approached the WGA, Western Golf Association, about starting this scholarship fund called the Evans Scholarship Fund. And it took him only 10 or so years to convince us to do it. But in 1930, took some of the proceeds from his record deal, if you will, and some other endorsement deals and started the Evans Scholars Foundation.
I just learned this recently, so I'm assuming there's other people listening that may not know this. It's the Western Golf Association because in the late 19th century, Chicago was the West. That was basically the pretty much the edge of the United States. And now we've, when I think about the Western Golf Association, it's very much to me associated with the Midwest. But at the time of its founding, it was the West. It was the far West, in fact.
It was. And I get that all the time. Why don't you change the name? Because people think you should be based in LA or San Francisco. And It was in 1899. The train basically stopped in Chicago, and it was really because a group of golfers in the Midwest thought the USGA had too much East Coast bias, if you will, and they wanted to have tournaments in the Midwest, and they wanted to have representation in the big cities of the Midwest, and so that was really the genesis for the Western Golf Association.
You mentioned this earlier, but is everything oriented at the Western Golf Association towards funds and fundraising for these scholarships? So even on the professional tournament side, if you're hosting a Corn Ferry event, is that where things get directed and your fundraising efforts? Is it all go to that?
Yeah, it does, Mason. It's very singularly focused, right? It's really helped us focus on our mission is let's figure out how we can send more kids to college on a scholarship. And that takes money, right? But tournaments are a great vehicle to do that, not only to raise money for scholarships, but also build awareness. We have great partners at the BMW Championship and BMW and the PGA Tour, and they have kind of adopted this philosophy that the Evans Scholars Foundation is the true driver. That's why we want to have a successful tournament, is to benefit the charity.
That's great. Now, why don't we zoom out just a little bit on caddying in general? Why is that a good thing for youth and teen to do as a job or as an experience?
A lot of people listening to this will have probably caddied as a kid, right? Caddying used to be much more prevalent, obviously in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And then the golf cart came around and probably cut into a lot of opportunities for kids to caddy. And then if you layer on top of that, a lot of jobs that kids used to have, whether it was cutting lawns or delivering newspapers, a lot of those jobs are done by adults now. And so we feel that caddying, especially youth caddying, is the best summer job a kid can have for a number of reasons, right? One, it teaches them responsibility, teaches them hard work ethic. They've got to show up. They've got to work hard. They get paid very well in a lot of instances. And most importantly, they get a chance to spend 4 hours, hopefully less than 4 hours, but 4 hours with an adult who's a member typically at a country club. So they've probably been very successful in life. And so these kids get a chance to see how doctors and lawyers and engineers and business people interact with each other. And they learn a lot of life lessons through this interaction caddy.
Couldn't agree more. Part of the reason you're on the show is that we had a great conversation with Nick Schreiber, who himself was a caddy and then had incredible influence from just that experience that influenced his whole life, including now as an owner of a golf club, putting a youth caddy program, and full circle moment. I've always had the sense, and tell me if this is changing a little bit, that the caddy programs are more prevalent in the Midwest. And I'm assuming that's a weather issue, that many of the clubs that aren't in the Sun Belt are open from April, May through October, November. They're kind of a 6-month season-ish. But is that because of where the WGA has been, or is that a weather-related issue that so many of the great youth caddy programs have been Midwest, or at least north of the Sun Belt?
That's a really good question. I mean, I like to think it's a combination of both. I mean, I think in the Midwest particularly, the Western Golf Association and that carrot, if you will, the Evans Scholarship, really influences a lot of kids caddying. But it also is the weather. I mean, our golf season basically, in the Midwest, the upper Midwest, and even, Northeast really coincides when kids are out of school. Really starts mid-May-ish, ends, right around mid-September. That's the heart of our season. And that's when kids are obviously, in between years in high school. And it used to be that way in the Northeast. But we found in the Northeast and in the mid-Atlantic, those seasons have gotten a little longer. And a lot of adults are caddying in those jobs that maybe once were kids because the season's longer and the players want to have caddies, and that means adults.
We started to scratch the surface of the Evans Scholars Foundation, the program. That's a portion of the youth caddy programs that are prevalent. But specifically, the Evans program is unique in that, and I want you to describe it, not me, but you have relationships with a significant amount of universities, but the scholarships you have houses at these schools. This is not a check that gets written and you say, here's $5,000, study hard and good luck with everything. I mean, they are being set up without the burden of a significant amount, if not almost all the expenses that come with college days, which I'm assuming Chick Evans would not even be able to wrap his head around how expensive it is to go to school today if it was expensive when he was at Northwestern. But can you talk a little bit about the relationship with the universities and the scholarships themselves and what those kind of the heavy lifting that those do for a lot of the students that win these scholarships or earn these scholarships?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. College is really expensive. I mean, my daughter just graduated and it's expensive, right? And it's almost unattainable for a lot of people, and especially the universities where we have partnerships with. So we have partnerships with 27 different universities around the country, mostly big schools, schools that offer every major. And as you said, the scholarship provides tuition and housing. And that's kind of the secret sauce of our scholarship. There are a lot of great scholarships out there, golf related and not golf related, but our scholarship involves housing. So a student receives the Evans Scholarship, and let's say they get awarded to the University of Illinois. Starting their freshman year, they live in an Evans Scholar House that we own and operate with their fellow scholars that go from freshman to senior year. So you're immediately at a university that's a big place, but you have your group that you identify with. They're caddies. That's the commonality, right? They're caddies. You worked hard to get to college, but a lot of our students are first generation college kids. They don't even know like what classes to take or how to study, but because of living in our house, they immediately have this peer group that helps them get through college, right? This is how you study. These are the classes you should take. And so we kind of give them a head start, if you will. And our housing piece is a little different. I immediately cringe when you try to explain it to someone. The best analogy in terms of the house is a fraternity or sorority. That's the external. Internally, it's nothing like that. It's men and women living together. You know, there's the substance-free houses.
High expectation of grades. Like
you got it. You got it. But they happen, a lot of these houses at these universities happen to be near the fraternities and sororities. And matter of fact, when we add a new university partner, sometimes we buy an old fraternity or sorority house and convert it into an Evans Scholar House. So that's the secret sauce. Our students live together for 4 years in the Evans Scholar House. They live and learn together. And there are so many great stories of people 30, 40 years later that, you know, are in business with people they were Evans Scholars with, or they're still lifelong friends. It's part of the reason our kids graduate at such a high rate, because they won't let others fail.
That's incredible. So talk a little bit about how does one apply and end up trying to become an Evans Scholar? So if you have a youth caddy program at a golf course and it has dozens and dozens of local kids working there, what does it take to actually get to the point that you could apply for one of the scholarships you just described?
It's a selective process, don't get me wrong. And it's a merit-based scholarship first and foremost. So you have to be a good caddy. That's primary. You got to be a good caddy. There are some minimums around caddying. You've got to caddy for 2 years. You got to have caddied 100 times. So those are the absolute minimums. You have to have excellent grades. You know, the average Evans Scholar has a high school GPA of around 3.8. Their ACT test is around 20. The average score is around 28. So you got to be strong academically. You have to have financial need. And you know, that varies. It depends on each family's situation, but this is a need-based scholarship for sure. And then you have to have outstanding character, which basically means you're involved in things in and outside school. So you volunteer, you're on sports teams, you're maybe in theater, et cetera.
That's a high bar. Not to say it shouldn't be, but I mean, that's you're checking pretty much every box at that point as a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old.
For sure. These are highly motivated kids. I mean, highly motivated kids that have shown that they have an aptitude to work really hard, because caddying's not for the faint of heart. It's just not. I mean, it's when you're a little kid carrying a bag that's maybe as heavy as you are, for 4 hours is hard in an 80 or 90 degree
day. And that's
day.
just the carrying the bag part, not the
Right.
not the EQ and not the where do I stay? Like all the little golf has a lot of strange little nuance to it. So
yeah, especially if you don't play, right? You don't even, you don't. Matter of fact, I had a kid caddying for me once. It was the first time she ever caddied, and the guy I'm playing with hits it to a foot on a par 3. It was a great shot, and she didn't say anything. Because I asked her, I said, why didn't you say it? She goes, well, I didn't know if it was a good shot or not.
Yeah.
Well, she'd never seen golf before, right?
Understandable.
I will say, though, the application process is open to anyone, that has caddied. And you will ultimately, we ask them for letters of recommendation from, let's say, the caddy manager at the club or the golf professional, and then some, members that they may have caddied for. But we get roughly 1,000 plus scholarship applications a year. And we award roughly 350 scholarships
every single year.
Yeah, so that's a pretty good percentage, right? Roughly a third get the scholarship, but it's a pretty small pool, if you will, of the potential applicants. And that's something we're trying to grow.
We've talked previously, and you had mentioned some pretty lofty goals for expansion. And you're welcome to talk about those. But is your challenge finding youth? Is it finding golf courses? Is it finding schools that can house them? Is it fundraising? Where do you face the biggest challenges? Or ask it differently, where are the biggest opportunities for you to reach some of these lofty ambitions that your leadership team and the board and everybody else has decided you should be going for?
Yeah, Mason, I would tell you that we do have some lofty goals as an organization, but it all centers around one, and that is to have 1,500 kids in school by the year 2030. Which is the 100th anniversary of the Evans Scholars Foundation. But we stated that goal when we had roughly 800 kids in school. And so we're going to double the amount of kids in school in roughly 10 years. And there are so many layers to how to get there. And somebody might just say, well, you could just lower your standards, let more kids in. And that's not something we want to do. We want to go out and find, number one, kids that need a chance. But we also need to figure out where they're going to caddy. So we've got to grow caddy programs. And we're doing that, actually. And the more we tell the story of the Evans Scholars Foundation and the opportunity, the more people are interested. And as you know, I mean, we're starting youth-based caddy programs that, Nick has been awesome at Old Barnwell. We're doing it in South Carolina. We're starting programs in Florida, Georgia, Texas, Arizona. And then we're tapping into some existing, I'll say, adult-based programs. So the club has an adult-based program, but they want to infuse some kids in there as well.
So you mean like a hybrid model where there's a set of caddies that are adult and maybe year-round, but then you also simultaneously have youth caddies coming in and when their schedule allows? And okay.
In very specific youth caddies. So it would be kids that maybe are predisposed to get the Evans Scholarship because they're really good academically, they have financial need, but they need the caddy rounds. So at places like Seminole and LA Country Club, you're talking, great golf courses, great caddy programs that are willing to infuse a select number of kids with the idea that, hopefully they can get the Evans Scholarship. And it's happened at those places and a bunch of other places around the country. And we found that the adult caddies find this pretty additive to the caddy yard, if you will. They're rooting for these kids.
Yeah.
They know the members, they're going to make their money regardless, but they're rooting for these kids. And I would say that the biggest challenge for us is also the biggest opportunity in that it is an expensive program. We start on January 1st with, zero money raised. We've got to raise enough to pay the bills throughout the year. And it is complete grassroots fundraising. It's individuals, it's foundations. There's no government support. We've got to raise a lot of money, but that's a challenge. The opportunity is it's hard to argue that education's important for people, right? For first generation students, education can change the course of their lives, their families' lives, their families' lives. So the more you can tell the story to people that have the wherewithal to help, the more they're willing to do that. And so we just got to, spread the word, if you will, tell more people about the program. And we find that generally people are pretty receptive to supporting us.
Yeah, I think so. And I was going to ask you this, and I don't know if there's a good answer to it, but it seems like the Evans Scholars and even more broadly, the Western Golf Association has had a cool factor or a swagger to it with younger folks. Look, golf can be hard, especially for organizations that have been around for 100 years. They're just trying to stay relevant and modern and have, increasingly new and younger generations care about their mission, support them, whatever it might be. It feels to me like the younger folks, if I was generalizing, but also even, influential social media and other platforms and podcasters seem to dig what the Western Golf Association does. And do you have any sense of why that's the case? Some of them could have been caddies and maybe this is their moment to support, but why is it that No Laying Up and Andy Johnson, and we could go on and on about people seem to gravitate towards what you all are doing?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. And I do have a theory, and I don't know if it's right or not, but I do think that a younger generation of golfers, they're sick of riding in golf carts. They want to walk. right? They want to walk and then they want to play at really good golf courses, whether it's a private club or high-end resorts. And typically those places have caddy programs. And I think that they really, they love playing the golf course, the facility, and they love taking caddies. And then when you start talking about kids, maybe it does bring back a little bit of memory when they caddied or the friend caddied or whatever, right? But there definitely is. I like that. There's a little bit more of a hip factor these days.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but you're probably exactly right, because there has been a movement in recent 20 to 30 years or so about going backwards with golf course design and walking and being a little bit more minimalist and being one with nature, and a lot of things that are great about the game that kind of got lost in the decades where they were building golf courses for real estate purposes and put golf cement paths and golf carts everywhere. So I hadn't thought about that there's been a bit of a renaissance of walking and of carrying your bag and not needing 75 pounds of stuff. You can do it with a light bag. And that probably has benefited your organization in some ways with this of the last couple of decades, this movement towards that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you just look at like the Pied Piper of let's say new age golf course design is, Mike Kaiser and Bandon Dunes. And it's not lost on me or anyone that when you go there, you're taking a caddy. And I think that really set the bar for a lot of these, let's call them newer destination places. And even, places that are renovated or places that people play every day and aren't necessarily a destination place. It has made kind of it cooler to walk with smaller gear, lighter golf bag, the minimalistic, if you will, and then take a caddy.
If anything positive came from COVID, one of them was golf got a real injection of interest because you could be outside. And I think that didn't just pass over a few months. I think that's stuck around with people realizing that it's all tied together and people being outside and being able to walk and get away from their phones and other things. Have you sensed that that's still going? Like there's still momentum from that?
COVID was, obviously that was really super strange time for this country, but it was the greatest thing that happened to the golf industry in who knows how long, right? I talked to a lot of people around the country, especially people that were trying to grow caddy programs. And I mean, everyone has a list the length of your arm about, members that want to join the club. Mm-hmm. Their tee sheets are packed and it's a great time for the owners and operators, or let's say the boards of clubs, to implement things that maybe they wouldn't have done in the past, i.e. a caddy program.
Yeah. You
want to be a member at our club? You're going to take a caddy. It's some, way, shape or form. It's funny. What's one of the biggest obstacles to caddying, and I sometimes use my wife as a litmus test. She's a golfer. She gets nervous taking caddies. She doesn't know what to do. And I think that is part of it, right? Is that, people don't know how to take a caddy. What I would tell you is any caddy worth his or her salt has seen someone way more nervous than you. They've seen someone worse than you. They've seen someone better than you. It's
seen it all. Yeah.
It's seen it all. You got to just get over it. Especially if you think taking a kid, even if the kid doesn't get the Evans scholarship, it's a great job for a kid. I also think it's the only job where you get evaluated every day. And here's how you get evaluated: how much they pay you, right? That's a real correlation to how good of a job you did. Or maybe it's how good they played, but probably a little of both.
No, that's absolutely true. I know. But one of the things that Nick has talked about, the founder of Old Barnwell, was at a minimum, if you're taking a youth caddy, if you do nothing else, treat it as 4 hours of a mentorship opportunity. Tell them about what you do with your profession, how you treat your friends. I mean, there's so many things you can do if nothing else. And how many times does a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid get to spend 4 hours talking to an adult about whatever it is that adult does or thinks about life?
Right. And think about it. We get a lot of Evans scholars. You say, what do you want to major in college? And their freshman year, they'll say, engineering. I want to be an engineer. I want to be a doctor, because, a lot of the people they caddied for might have done that. And then when they actually get to school, they're like, holy cow, this is really hard.
Sounded good on the golf course. Now I actually have to do, years and years and years where, they can do it, I'm sure, based on the qualifications you had. I had the chance, John, to sit in and listen to a couple of the Evans finalist interviews earlier this year. And it's really emotional when you hear their stories and you hear about some of the challenges that they've faced. You go through this every single year with over 300 new Evans scholars. Are you ever overcome with emotion when you hear their stories?
Yeah, only every time I listen to them. It's really incredible, Mason. So the final step in the Evans Scholarship application process is you're selected as a finalist. And the final step is an oral interview in front of a committee. And so that committee might be 3 people, it might be 100 people. But every person that's ever received the Evans Scholarship since the inception interviews in front of the committee, and it's your chance to tell your story and ultimately answer questions. And you're right, it is so powerful. You hear these, because you can read about it when they submit an essay, but when someone talks about how their dad was, incarcerated, or their mother, left, and they basically raised their siblings on their own, it's incredible just the fortitude most of these applicants have, because it would be really easy just to say, I'm not doing it, right? And I love the stories of kids that caddy out in kind of some of these destination places like Colorado, right? And, those are some very far distances in between where they live and the club. And I can remember kids taking buses, getting a ride, taking buses that would be an hour and a half each way just to caddy, because they knew it was at stake, right? And I think a lot of times in these interviews, you can see just how important it is to the kid because they know what's at stake, right? Like we talked about before, college is really expensive and their families can't afford it. And so, if they succeed, and most of them do, if they succeed in this final step in the process, it's a big deal.
Coming back to what you said earlier about sometimes how you may have felt Sunday night in the white collar world, is this what gets you excited to come into work on Mondays? What we just talked about? Yeah,
for sure. I joke. My joke is that I can watch golf on Sunday afternoon and I'm working, but the real reason is that the impact you can make on these people on the kids is just out of this world. And then fast forward. So I've been here for 27 years. There are kids that I saw in interviews 27 years ago that are now full-fledged career and family. And, they're successful and they give back to the organization. So it's pretty cool.
All right, full circle, full virtuous cycle, I guess I would call that. I'm going to, in a second, just ask you just a couple of questions about the future and we can wrap. But in the meantime, if someone is interested in likes what you all are doing, what are a couple of ways that they can help out?
So, the easiest way is, making a donation to support our efforts. That's the easiest way. And of course, all this information is at our website. Every charity in the world can't run without donors, right? And so we need donors and always try to grow that donor base. But there's also the idea that people want to get involved. And so we're always looking for people to get involved, especially at a club or a golf course that has a caddy program or wants to develop a caddy program, and they want to help do that. And that means recruiting their fellow players or members to take caddies. Because believe it or not, it's not that hard to get the kids to show up. What's hard is to get the kids out. And you got to get the members to say, yeah, we're going to take the kid. We're going to pay the kid whatever it is, $80 and to go out. Although that's not necessarily making a donation to the Evans Scholars Foundation, it's helping support caddy programs, right?
Yeah.
And then, there's a big need, I think, for mentorship, whether or not they're Evans Scholars or just kids, like you talked about, mentoring a kid in a round of golf. We have formal mentorship programs with our students. So we have, over 1,200 kids in school that want to go into every possible profession that you can imagine. We're always looking for professional people to help them, guide them on the process.
Love it. So if somebody, you donate money, you can be a mentor, or you can also just be a voice at your place of playing golf, private or publicly, where you say, I think it would be great if we had a youth caddy program, and get you some of your fellow influential golfers to go in and talk to the general manager or to the golf pro there.
Like Mason, this entire thing for us doesn't work unless people take caddies. That's the backbone, right? It's interesting. When I started caddy the rumor was caddy programs were dying, but it was really hard to quantify because caddies typically are a little bit under the radar group, right? And we've done a really good job, I think, the last 10 years of trying to quantify how many programs are out there. And we know that they're growing. Year over year, there are more caddy programs today than there were last year. And there's more people caddying, and hopefully a lot of them are kids.
Again, my biases are very transparent here, but it makes playing golf a better experience. And I would say that if you haven't done it and you're interested in doing it, but you mentioned Mike Kaiser. I think he really advanced the caddy cause by saying that we believe that this makes a better experience for you. And I think that has had a significant amount of influence on people's willingness to not just take them, but for clubs to have those programs, because I can't imagine many people you could find that would say, I had a caddy and I wish I had a golf cart. I haven't met any of those people, but maybe there's a couple out there. All right, just the last few things. Looking forward into your proverbial crystal ball, I want to hear a little bit about, we'll go big to small, like golf, then the WGA, and then Evans Scholars. When you look in your crystal ball looking forward, what are you excited about or optimistic about golf?
Well, I love the fact that the game is now can be played different ways. So it used to be just 18 holes. And I love this idea of playing 9 holes, playing 6 holes, golf courses that are being developed with, certain loops in mind. I love that. I love the idea of non-traditional places where you can go play golf, like Top Golf and these short courses. And it reminds me of when I was a kid. Like, I learned how to play golf on the crappiest par 3 course you could ever play on, but it was an entree to the game, right? So all these vehicles bring in new players. And then the thing I love is this whole idea of returning golf course design, either, new golf courses or maybe renovating existing places, to more of a golden age of architecture. Less trees, classic design, more playability. I think it's hard to build golf courses that can challenge the world's best players, but also appeal to, the rest of us. But it's pretty exciting that some people are doing that. And there's some great new places to play and places we never thought would be possible to have golf.
Sounds like they're figuring out now how to have golf courses that are equally enjoyable for very talented golfers, college golfers, whoever, and also high handicappers and people that are learning. And that's a hard thing to do. And for a lot of years, it was one or the other.
Right. Remember, like when I was growing up, it was that the courses were rated or thought of as how hard they were.
Right.
That's not fun at all. Right?
No.
I'd rather go out and play somewhere perceived easy, but we had a great time.
And thankfully, I think culture has moved to thinking about it that way as well. Culture and golf culture. All right, your crystal ball for the WGA. What's in your crystal ball for the, and what are you excited about?
As it relates to the WGA, I mean, I'm excited about the growth and what we do on the championship side of things. We're expanding our efforts in women's golf. We would love to run a professional women's golf tournament in the future. And then I'm kind of excited about, as it relates to the professional game, there's going to be a lot of changes coming up with the PGA Tour. We've been a founding partner with the PGA Tour. We were there since the tour was started in 1968. And we're just excited about what the future holds for professional golf. I mean, interest, I think, is at a really high level and continues to grow.
Right. And then we're going to fittingly end with the Evans Scholars Foundation. We talked a lot about it and some of your expansion plans and growth plans and getting to your 100th anniversary. Anything else that we didn't cover that you're excited about as you look forward? And also, how are you tracking on the goal? 2030 sounded like a long way away, but I think it's only 4 or 5 years left.
Clock is ticking, man. It is ticking up. I'm excited that we're cracking the code on, it used to be the Evans Scholars Foundation was the greatest untold story in golf. And I'm not sure that was ever actually a real phrase, but we use that internally. And I think we're getting we're better known in golf circles and in outside golf circles too. But we're going to get to our goal of 1,500 kids in school by 30. We're tracking right along where we need to be. We're adding a few new partner universities. Most recently, we added Arizona State University as part of our Western expansion, if you will. But I just think the future's bright. The more people we tell the story to, the more they want to get involved, the more they want to help. And I think we'll get to 1,500. I know we'll get to 1,500. And then our big thing is, what do we do next? What do we do for an encore?
You start working on your 125th anniversary. You start setting higher goals. I mean, that's incredible to set I think about 10-year goal of doubling your scholarship's incredible. Well, I'd like to think helping people who are, high potential, hardworking kids to get a free education should be a universally accepted thing, that no matter what you think, whether you play golf, don't play golf, no matter what you think about the world, that we could all agree on that. And I have to believe that will continue to be something that's of interest to people in the years to come.
I hope so. I mean, think about it. Everyone that in your family, my family, at some point, someone got an education. It can change the course of your family's life. So it's really hard to argue, to me, that it's important. It's essential.
I think so too, and thanks to you. And I know as a huge team at the WGA, you get to represent all of them and the leadership and all the people working there. So thanks for all you're doing. I'm excited. I take caddies whenever they're available, and I prefer youth caddies. In fact, I say if it's person's first day, give me the person's first day out there. I love it, and I encourage others to do it. And John, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck with all the upcoming goals and your 2030 plans.
Well, Mason, thanks. Really enjoyed talking to you.
So that's it for us today. Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about the WGA or Evans Scholars Foundation, check them out online at wgaesf.org or give them a follow on Instagram at WGAESF. For all of Schwab's golf content, including our films, tournament news, and promotions, check out schwabgolf.com. If you've enjoyed the show, which we hope you did, we'd be really grateful if you'd leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, a rating on Spotify, or feedback wherever you listen. We'll be back with a new episode in 2 weeks. For important disclosures, see the show notes or schwab.com/thegame.